It was a happy ending after that Parshuram scene. The aging Dasarath, thinking of his retirement, gradually entrusted more and more of the state affairs to Ram and Lakshmana. Those two princes, along with their wives, served the king in every way. They always thought of the welfare of the people. Everyone became pleased with their disposition and conduct. They were gentle and kind, but firm when necessary. They demonstrated complete mastery of the military arts and, having slain the powerful Rakshasas, even while boys, were respected as great heroes. Ram was especially dear to the king and the people. He was always tranquil and soft-spoken, not retorting even when someone spoke harshly to him. He recognized the smallest of services rendered and did not take to heart any wrongs against him. Ram had conquered anger and was full of compassion. Making all arrangements to protect the people, he surrounded himself with intelligent advisors and never made a decision without due consultation. Despite his power and ability, he always remained humble, mild, and self-controlled. He was not influenced by envy or hatred, did not engage in frivolous talks, and always sought the good in others. Free from sloth, he was ever vigilant to carry out his duty. Ram gave delight to even the gods, who would frequently grace Ayodhya with their presence. He was as tolerant as Mother Earth, as wise as Brihaspati, and as valorous as Indra. His personal beauty was as resplendent as the brilliant sun god. Dasarath, seeing his son endowed with so many virtues, longed to see him installed as the prince regent. The king discussed his desire with his ministers and priests. They all unanimously agreed that Ram, as the eldest son, was the rightful heir of the throne, and that he would be the most popular choice of the people. However, when the royal astrologers were calculating a favorable time for the coronation, they discovered dreadful signs in the heavens, portents that indicated that some calamity would soon occur. Dasarath became concerned. The omens must surely foretell of his own impending death. He decided to perform the ceremony quickly, at the earliest opportune moment. Having set a date for Ram's installation, he summoned the Ayodhya rulers and important men from around the globe. But the gods so arranged that Dasarath, in his haste, neglected to invite King Kushadhwaj. Who's King Kushadhwaj? That's the maternal father, the father of Bharat's mother, Kaikeyi, her father. He neglected to invite King Kushadhwaj. Thus neither Bharat nor Shatrughna came for the ceremony. Dasarath realized too late his omission, for it was a journey of some days to Raja Griha. Nevertheless, he considered that his two absent sons would soon receive the delightful news of their elder brother's installation. He felt sure they would be overjoyed and would not take offense. Soon a large gathering of kings and Brahmins appeared in Ayodhya, and Dasarath had them assembled in the royal court. Sitting in state in the assembly, the emperor blazed forth like Indra in the midst of the gods. He spoke in a pleasing and melodious voice. Probably didn't have a loudspeaker either. He was just able to, somehow they were able to project their voice in big audiences. Somehow. He spoke in a pleasing and melodious voice, which at the same time was sonorous and grave. Quote, all of you know how the earth has long been protected by me and the kings who previously appeared before me in my line. To the best of my ability, I've ruled the people, giving protection even at the expense of personal comforts. My body has become worn out in the shade of the royal umbrella. Carrying on my shoulders the burden of governing the globe, I have become old. I wish now to bestow this kingdom upon one well suited to take my place. He is my beloved and eldest son Ram, who vies with the kings of the gods, with the king of the gods in all virtues. With the agreement of my closest advisors and in accordance with custom and law, I desire to place Ram at the head of the state. With your permission, therefore, the ceremony will take place tomorrow morning. Dasarath looked around the vast assembly of kings and sages. All of them gazed at him intently as he spoke. The kings saw Dasarath as the leader of the entire earth. They all had affection for the old emperor, who always administered the law with justice and compassion. They willingly paid him tributes and sought his guidance in the affairs of state management. Dasarath oversaw the world situation, ensuring that the different kings and leaders all ruled according to the codes of religion. All the assembled kings felt that Ram was the perfect choice to succeed Dasarath. As the emperor looked at his obedient and gentle son, he was moved by love. He continued to speak with tears running from his eyes. Ram, who possesses every desirable quality, will be your worthy protector, and even the universe will be better ruled with him as emperor. If my plan finds favor with you, then be pleased to give your consent. Otherwise, if you consider that some other course should be taken, then speak out. Perhaps you may find me overly attached to Ram, choosing him when a better choice could be found. The views of the dispassionate are always to be sought when deciding a difficult issue. The whole assembly was filled with delight upon hearing Dasarath speak. They erupted with loud acclamations of joy, even as a crowd of peacocks would acclaim the appearance of a large rain cloud. The sound echoed all around Ayodhya, seeming to shake the earth. Let it be so, let it be so, was heard everywhere, and every man was in agreement. Stepping forward, a leader of the Brahmins said, you have protected us with love, O king. Now you have a worthy son and can retire peacefully. Pray, install Ram as the Prince Regent, for he alone deserves to be your successor. We long to see Ram riding upon the great royal elephant, his head shielded by the white umbrella. Upon hearing the assembly voice the unanimous agreement to Ram's installation, Dasarath stood up, his eyes flooded with tears of joy. It is fortunate for me and indeed the world that you all wish to see Ram succeed me as the king. This confirms my decision. I shall begin the arrangements for Ram's installation immediately. Dasarath came down from his throne and approached Vashishta, touching his feet. With your permission, O holy Brahmin, we shall proceed with the ceremony tomorrow. If you are agreeable, then please make all preparations. So be it, Vashishta replied, and immediately commanded the king's ministers to set about making ready all the items required for the installation the following day. The assembly then dispersed with a loud clamor, with shouts of victory to Ram were heard everywhere. That night, however, Dasarath remembered the astrological predictions. He became fearful and called for Ram. Speaking with him in private, Dasarath said, I have enjoyed a long life, and I have always protected the people to the best of my ability. In thousands of religious ceremonies, I bestowed abundant charity, but by sacrifice, worship and charity, I have repaid my debts to the gods, the Brahmanas, and the forefathers. I have also fully satisfied myself through the enjoyment of numerous pleasures. All that remains for me is to install you as my successor. Dasarath clasped Ram close to his bosom. The king's body trembled and his eyes shed tears. He desperately longed for his son to succeed him. At last it was imminent. Surely no evil destiny could prevent it now. Would not even the gods desire to see the magnificent prince become the king? Dasarath revealed his concerns to Ram, telling him of the malefic stars. He also told his son of the many bad dreams he had recently experienced. My dear Ram, due to seeing all these omens, your installation has been sought swiftly by me before any problems arise. With your good wife Sita, make offerings into the sacrificial fire tonight. At sunrise tomorrow, we shall commence the installation ceremony. Ram nodded in agreement and then bowed and took his leave from the king. He went back to his palace and along with Sita sat before a sacrificial fire making offerings to Vishnu. Then there's a break. The news of Ram's installation quickly spread around the city, delighting everyone, or almost everyone. There was one exception. The temples were thronged with people offering gifts and worshipping the gods. As evening fell, the city streets were filled with a flurry of joyous citizens. The large crowds of men moving about Ayodhya resembled the tossing waves of the ocean. Everyone spoke only of the installation. Poets and bards composed songs about the occasion. Flags were hoisted high on the housetops, and garlands of forest flowers were draped everywhere. Colorful festoons hung across the streets, which were swept and sprinkled with perfumed water. Shining lamps hung from every tree lining the streets. The city echoed everywhere with the loud chanting of Vedic mantras. Elephants and bulls roared on all the sides, and the whole atmosphere throbbed with excitement. No one could wait for sunrise when the ceremony would commence. In the palace of Kaikeyi, the king's youngest queen, there was a hunchbacked maidservant called Mantra. I'm asking your son. Mantra? You're not sure? Her name is Mantra. Mantara. Hunchbacked maidservant. Mantara. Upon seeing the celebrations, Mantra approached Ram's former nurse and inquired, "What occasion gives rise to this display of delight on every side? Is the emperor going to perform some great sacrifice?" The nurse, her face blossoming with happiness, told Mantra about the king's decision to install Ram as the heir apparent. "Tomorrow, under favorable stars, our Lord Dasarath will give to the sinless Ram the office of Prince Regent. What greater occasion for joy could there be?" Mantra's mind recoiled at this news. She was immediately seized with anger. Surely this was a disaster. With Ram installed as king, her mistress, Kaikeyi, would soon fall out of favor. Her own son Bharat being left as nothing more than Ram's servant. Mantra raged within herself. She had long enjoyed special privileges as Kaikeyi's senior maidservant. The emperor particularly liked her mistress, or queen, who had given Mantra the esteem she desired. As a hunchback, she had always been the butt of jokes and abuse among the other servants, but as her mistress became more influential, the other servants, even those of the senior queen Kaushalya, had been obliged to pay her respect. Sighing in anxiety, Mantra ran to Kaikeyi's room, where she found the queen lying upon a couch. With her face flushed, she began addressing her bemused mistress in harsh tones. "Get up, foolish woman! How can you lay there when calamity stares you in the face? You languish here at ease, even as a flood of misery sweeps towards you. Thoroughly neglected by your husband, you are threatened now with utter ruin." Kaikeyi looked affectionately at her servant. Mantra had been her childhood nurse, and Kaikeyi saw her like her own mother. The queen had not heard the news about Ram, and she inquired from Mantra, "Pray tell, what causes your sorrow at this time? You seem sorely afflicted." Mantra became even more incensed upon hearing Kaikeyi's question. She replied in a voice trembling with anger, "There is no doubt that disaster now threatens us both. With your destruction will come mine, as much as with your good fortune rests mine. I am therefore saying this only for your benefit," which isn't true. She grasped Kaikeyi's hand, trying to impress upon her mistress what appeared to her to be the obvious facts. "Although born in a royal line, you seem ignorant of the ways of kings. A king will speak sweet words to a person, while at the same time planning their destruction. The emperor has acted as your beloved spouse, while performing deeds which will ruin you to the very roots." Kaikeyi sat up and looked at her servant curiously. Mantra's eyes blazed as she continued, "Having sent your own son, Bharata, away to a distant kingdom, this wicked king now plans to install Ram as Prince Regent. What greater misfortune could there be for you?" Kaikeyi smiled. She loved Ram as much as her own dear son, while Ram, for his part, looked upon Kaikeyi as being equal to his own mother, Kaushalya. She felt a surge of joy hearing Mantra's report. She could not understand why Mantra was disturbed. Why was she so vehement? If anyone else had spoken about Dasarath and Ram in such a way, she would have had them punished. But Kaikeyi was accustomed to her servant's sullen temperament. She felt there was no malice in Mantra, despite her often angry expressions. Taking from her bosom a necklace of brilliant diamonds set in gold, Kaikeyi handed it over to her servant and said, "My dear Datri," means nurse, "this is surely the best news you have ever brought me. My heart swells with pleasure at hearing your words, which seem to me like nectar. I wish to reward you. Take this gift and tell me if there's anything else I can do for you." Mantra threw down the necklace and began rebuking Kaikeyi. "This is no occasion for joy, foolish lady. What strange frame of mind has seized you? An ocean of grief threatens to overwhelm you, and yet you stand here smiling? Your stepson Ram will become king, while your own son Bharat is left aside. Bharat's claim to the throne is the same as Ram's, and Ram will see him as an enemy." What's that claim to the throne? You know the story? There's a story. The story is when Kaikeyi, the third queen, was married, a promise was given by Dasarath. The promise was, your son will become the king. So the promise of the king, Dasarath, was that Bharat would become king. But now while Bharat's away, Ram's going to become king. So your son's claim is equal to that of Ram's claim to the throne. And thus Ram will see him as an enemy. Lakshmana serves only Ram, and Shatrughna serves your son. Therefore, it is only Ram or Bharat who may be crowned as the sovereign of this world. My mind quakes with fear to think of the danger to your son from the powerful Ram once he is king. Mantra's eyes grew bloodshot with fury, and her face whitened as she spoke. Why was Kaikeyi not understanding? Kaushali had long been snubbed by the king in favor of Kaikeyi. When Ram became the king, that would all change. Kaushalya would be exalted to the highest level, while Kaikeyi would lose her special position in the king's most favored consort. Kaushalya would certainly exact her revenge for her long suffering. Kaikeyi would become Kaushalya's maidservant, and Bharat would be, at best, Ram's servant. More likely, he would be exiled. Where would that leave Kaikeyi's servants? She's thinking about herself. That's all. Praying to the gods to help her, the hunchback maid became more ardent in her plea. You must do something. This is a great disaster. Once the crown has passed to the other side of your family, you will see in time your own side sink into oblivion, bereft of all royal fortune. Hearing this strong submission from her servant, the beautiful Kaikeyi thought of Ram. She could not imagine him bearing any ill will toward Bharat. Mantra's fears were quite groundless. Ram always acted in perfect accord with religious principles. He was devoted to truth, disciplined, and always kind. He doubtlessly deserved to be king. After he was crowned, he would surely look after his younger brothers like a father. Mantra had no reason to feel such distress. Kaikeyi chided her gently. When such an occasion for rejoicing has come, you should by no means give way to grief, my dear maidservant, nor should you think ill of Ram. My son Bharata will be in no danger from Ram, and in the future he may well succeed him to the throne. There is no need for lamentation. Mantra would not be placated. In order to improve her own position, she wanted her mistress to be the mother of the king. Blinded by her own greed and envy, Mantra considered the emperor to be acting from similar motivations. She continued to beseech Kaikeyi in increasingly rancorous tones. Surely it is due to stupidity only that you fail to see your impending doom, O deluded one. Ram will be crowned king, and after him will come his son. Where then will Bharat be left? Not all the sons of a king can assume the throne. It falls only on one among them. Having taken hold of the throne, Ram will ensure that it goes to his own son, if necessary, by banishing Bharat, or perhaps even by sending him to the next world. You and your line will be lost and forsaken. I am here to awaken you to a great peril now arrived at your door. Do not disregard me. Mantra's lofty position in the palace had gone to her head. She was furious at the prospect of losing her status, and she continued to present many arguments to her mistress. She played upon the natural rivalry existing between the king's co-wives. Kaikeyi's affection for Ram was deep, and the discussion went back and forth for some time, but gradually Mantra began to change her mistress's mind. By the gods' arrangement, her arguments swayed Kaikeyi's mind, and the queen's intelligence became confused. Although she loved Ram, she began to consider that his installation was an injustice. Mantra saw in Kaikeyi's face that her mind was wavering. She grasped the queen's hand. There is a way by which we may not be ruined. If Ram can be sent to the forest and Bharat installed in his place, then the sovereignty may be secured in your line. This idea had entered Mantra's mind by the sudden inspiration of the gods. Kaikeyi, intrigued, looked at her servant. How can this be accomplished? Mantra recalled the story she had heard from her mistress many years earlier. Some time ago, you told me how you once went with your husband when he was assisting Indra in a battle against the demons. Having fought hard one day, your husband lay unconscious on the battlefield, his body severely wounded. A grave danger beset him then from a demon who would come at night to devour the bodies of the warriors still on the field. Kaikeyi remembered the incident. Many years back, the emperor had gone to the heavens, taken Kaikeyi with him. He was famed as an invincible warrior. The gods had asked his assistance in a fight. At that time, he fought so powerfully that his chariot appeared to be facing 10 directions simultaneously, and thus the gods had therefore named him Dasarath, or 10 chariots. Mantra continued, at that time, seeing the danger to Dasarath, you rode out in a chariot and rescued your lord. Upon recovering, he offered you a couple of boons, but you deferred them to a time when you might need them most. Surely that time has come now. Go to Dasarath and ask him that he banish Ram and install Bharat in his place as Prince Regent. In this way, we shall both be saved. His writing style is not the same as Valmiki. He's repeating the motivations of Mantra. I mean, her motivations may be like that, but that's not quite the way that Valmiki wrote it. Despite her love for her husband and her attachment for Ram, Kaikeyi became convinced by Mantra's arguments. She was upset. How could the king have treated her in such a way? He was always so kind and loving. Was all that just a show to win her favor? She began to feel angry. The king might have spoken so many sweet words to her, but by his behavior, it was obvious that he favored Kaushalya. They had probably even conspired together to have Bharata sent away. Why had she not realized it before? It was obvious. Now the whole situation was revealed. Dasarath had shown his real feelings by completely neglecting her and favoring Kaushalya's son instead. Kaikeyi heaved a doleful sigh. Your suggestion finds favor with me, Mantra. I shall this very moment go before the king and ask him these boons. Mantra's mind was full of cunning. Her eyes narrowed. You should ask that Ram be banished for no less than 14 years. Within that time, your son Bharat will become dear to the people, and he will be firmly established on the throne. Mantra intelligently knew that Bharata could never become the king in Ram's presence. The people would not allow it to happen. Even the humble Bharat himself would almost surely not accede to such an arrangement. Ram had to be banished. There's other explanations besides. Anyway, this is his writing style. The maidservant continued, do not allow Ram to remain in the kingdom. By his power and influence, he will seize the throne even if Bharata is crowned. Your son has long been away, while Ram has been here, winning the hearts of the people. It is imperative that Ram be sent away for a long time. Kaikeyi listened with full attention as her maidservant revealed her insidious plan. Listen, as I tell you the means for approaching the king. Putting on soiled garments, you should go to the sulking chamber and lie down there on the bare floor, with your ornaments cast about and your hair in disarray. Lay there, weeping. Mantra knew that her mistress was guileless by nature. The queen would not have acted politically, even though angered, but her servant led her along. She spoke of Dasarath's special affection for his youngest and most beautiful wife. The king will never be able to tolerate your sullen mood. He cannot ignore your order. For your sake, he will enter fire and even lay down his own life. Using the power of your charms, you will easily achieve your end, O beautiful lady. Clenching her fist, Kaikeyi sat on her bed, spread with a pure white silk sheet. Mantra was right. The king obviously liked her for something, if only her beauty and charms. Every evening he spent time with her. Tonight he will be in for a surprise. Kaikeyi came fully under the sway of anger as Mantra continued. When the king sees you distraught, he will take you up and offer you anything. He'll present priceless gems and pearls in order to pacify you. Do not be distracted from your goal of banishing Ram. Insist upon the 2 boons long ago given by your Lord. Take those boons now, O Queen. Demand the exile of Ram and the coronation of Bharata. Although Mantra showed her mistress an evil course disguised as good, Kaikeyi accepted her advice. Kind, gentle, and wise by nature, Kaikeyi nevertheless lost her good sense under the influence of her envious maid. Considering her husband and Ram as enemies, she spoke with hot, heavy breaths. You have given me good counsel, O wise woman. I have been cheated by the king. You have acted as my well-wisher by pointing this out. When my son is installed on the throne, I shall confer upon you numerous boons and much wealth. Mantra smiled and urged Kaikeyi to make haste. Let us go quickly to the inner chambers, for the king will shortly come for the evening visit with you. You should by no means stand by as Ram has made Prince Regent. Act swiftly for the interest of your son and for your own self. Kaikeyi was pierced again and again by Mantra's sharp words. The servant repeatedly spoke against the king and Ram, stoking Kaikeyi's anger more. Arriving at the sulking chamber, the queen threw herself on the floor and said to Mantra, either Ram is exiled and Bharata is made king, or I shall remain here in this state, taking neither food nor water. If my desire is not fulfilled, then you shall see me depart from this spot for the region of the dead. With her ornaments scattered and her garland crushed, Kaikeyi lay on the beautiful mosaic floor, appearing like a goddess fallen from the heavens. Her face dark with rage, she tossed about and sobbed. End of chapter 5. And we're just going to read a little bit, into chapter 6. The king's heartbreak. Dasarath. Having seen that all the arrangements for the installation were underway, he made his way towards Kaikeyi's rooms for his evening rendezvous. The glorious monarch entered Kaikeyi's excellent apartment as the moon might enter the sky at night, spreading its beautiful rays. Peacocks, parrots, and other species of colorful birds crowded the palace, their cries augmenting the sounds of various musical instruments. Hundreds of well-dressed maids moved about in the great halls and rooms in which were hung flowing silk drapes and numerous fine paintings. Along the outer walls grew trees filled with blossoms and fruits. Tall seats of ivory, burnished with gold, stood everywhere, along with expansive couches covered with soft cushions, Costly, hand-woven carpets covered the floors. First-class food and drink of every variety were provided in gold, and crystal dishes laid out on golden tables. Dasra swept through the palace, which rivaled paradise itself. The armed guards at the outer doors bowed low as he passed, while at the inner doors the female servants folded their palms in respect. Coming at last to Kaikeyi's personal quarters, the king did not see her lying on her bed as he expected. Dasrath was surprised to find that his beloved spouse had failed to meet him at the usual time. He called out for her. When there was no reply, the king was dismayed. What had happened? He searched about and finding Kaikeyi's doorkeeper, inquired of his wife's whereabouts. With a dejected expression, the portress, so the doorkeeper, told the king that Kaikeyi had entered the sulking chamber in an angry mood. Even further dismayed upon hearing this strange report, the king quickly made his way towards his wife. He entered the sulking chamber and saw she was fallen on the floor in a sorry and unseemly state. Dasrath looked sadly upon his youngest queen, who was dearer to him than his life, but who now held in her heart a wicked and sinful desire. Lying on the ground, she looked like a rose creeper, violently torn from its tree, or like an apsara dropped from heaven, or a doe caught in a hunter's snare. Dasrath looked upon her as the lord of elephants might look upon his mate lying pierced by a poisoned arrow. Fondly stroking her tear-streaked face, the agitated emperor spoke to her softly. Your anger is surely not meant for me, who only wishes for your unending happiness. Tell me, O gentle lady, by whom have you been insulted or rebuked, so that you now lie here rolling in the dust? Who deserves punishment today at my hands? Or do you wish me to release someone who deserves to be punished? By whom have you been offended, and whom would you seek to oblige? Kaikeyi said nothing, and did not even look at the king. Dasrath felt tormented as he sought at length to appease her. If you are ailing, then I shall call here the royal physicians who will quickly heal your pain. Speak out whatever is amiss and allow me to make amends. I can by no means tolerate your distress and will quickly perform any work which pleases you. This earth with all its wealth belongs to me. What shall I bestow upon you today? What can you gain by torturing yourself in this way, my beloved queen? Please rise up and tell me the source of your sorrow. Kaikeyi was comforted and encouraged by her husband's entreaty. He was ready to do anything to please her. She prepared to put forward her terrible proposal. Seeing Dasrath deeply moved by love for her, Kaikeyi spoke in strained tones. I have not been insulted or offended by anyone, O king. There is, however, something I wish to accomplish. Make me a solemn vow that you will fulfill my desire, and then I shall tell you what it is. Dasrath placed her head upon his lap and straightened her disheveled hair. He smiled at her and said, Save for my son Ram, there is none in this world more dear to me than you. I swear, then, by that invincible, high-souled Ram, dearer to me than my life, that I shall satisfy your cherished desire. That very Ram, from whom separation would surely end my life, I swear to carry out your order. Indeed, by Ram, whom I would have in exchange for even my own self, my other sons, and the entire earth, I promise to do what your bidding. Please therefore reveal your mind to me, O good lady. Kaikeyi saw that her husband had bound himself completely by this thrice spoken vow. She inwardly rejoiced and felt that her ends were practically achieved. She then said to him what had been difficult to say even for an enemy, and which was like death, arrived at Dasarath's door. Let all the gods headed by Indra witness your promise. Let the sun, the moon, the sky, fire, day and night, the four quarters with their presiding deities, the universe itself and the indwelling Lord in everyone's heart, take heed of your great vow. The glorious, highly glorious Emperor, who is always true to his word and who knows what is right, has given me his promise. Looking intently at her husband, bemused, Kaikeyi said, remember now, O king, how in former times you fought with the gods against the demons and how I saved your life? Surely you recall that your offer to me then of 2 boons. Having kept those with you all this time, I now wish to take them. Grant me those boons, O Lord, and see me give up my life, or see me give up my life this very day. Held under the powerful sway of passion and bound by his infallible promise, the king, like a deer stepping into a snare, made ready to accord the 2 boons to his queen. Kaikeyi continued, my first boon, let my son Bharat be installed as the prince regent in Ram's place. For the second, let Ram be exiled to the forest and remain there for 14 years. Be true to your promise, O King of Kings, and cover both yourself and your race with everlasting glory. For some time, Dasarath gazed at his wife in utter disbelief. He was seized by an agonizing anxiety when he heard her cruel utterance. Surely, this could not be happening. Was he really hearing this, or was it a dream? Had something experienced in a former life suddenly returned as a vivid hallucination? Maybe he was simply losing his sanity. How could Kaikeyi have made such a request? She had always shown a deep affection for Ram. As he considered her words again and again, Dasarath became overpowered with grief and fainted away. Upon regaining consciousness, he saw before him his wife, sitting with a stern expression, and remembered again her terrible request. As, distressed as a deer in the sight of a lion, the king sat upon the bare floor. He sighed, like a poisonous serpent transfixed by the mystical spells of a charmer, crying out, alas! What a calamity! He swooned once more. As he again came back to consciousness, the king began to feel furious. This was entirely unexpected from Kaikeyi. She was revealing a side of her nature that he had never seen before. He thundered at his queen, as if about to consume her with his blazing wrath. Oh, cruel and wicked woman! It seems you are set upon the destruction of my race. What harm have Ram or I ever done you? Why then are you so bent on bringing ruin to me and mine at such a time? By harboring all this while, I have held to my bosom a venomous snake. When practically the whole of humanity extols Ram's virtues, how shall I forsake him? I might give up my wives, my kingdom, and indeed my life, but I can never part with Ram. Dasarath broke off, too shocked to continue. Had he not shown kindness to Kaikeyi? How could she hurt him in this way? Surely she realized that her request would kill him. Deeply impassioned, he spoke with tears in his eyes. The world may exist without the sun, crops may grow without water, but in no event can life remain in my body without seeing Ram. Therefore, give up this sinful desire, O beautiful lady, placing my head upon your feet. I beseech you to be gracious to me. Dasrath held his wife's feet and gazed into her face. Kaikeyi sat looking at him impassively without saying a word. In plaintive tones, the king continued, if you feel I have slighted your son Bharat, let him indeed be installed in place of Ram. But what need is there to send away the lotus-eyed and gentle Ram? I cannot believe that you have alone developed such disdain for Ram. On so many previous occasions, you have told me that your love for my beloved son. Surely you are now possessed of an evil spirit. Dasrath could not imagine how else his wife could behave in this way. She had never been harsh toward him before. He remembered the astrological omens. Surely his wife's strange request was the work of some malevolent influence. He spoke more gently. I have seen myself how Ram serves you even more than he does his own son Bharat, your own son Bharat. Have you not always told me so yourself? How then have you come to desire Ram's exile in the dreadful forest for a full 14 years? Let him remain here and let Bharat be king. What objection could you have to that? Kaikeyi did not waver, because this narrative is very different than Valmiki Ramayana. It's too different for me. Anyway, she had lost her trust in Dasrath, and she seethed with anger. He was simply trying to win her over with empty words, but she was not going to be fooled anymore. She remembered Manthara's warning. The king and his beloved Kaushalya were not going to cheat her this time. She would get her boons no matter what Dasrath said. She sat in silence. Dasrath could not think clearly. He was torn by his love for Ram and his promise to his wife, who had now seized him violently by the heart. Realizing that he could never order his son to enter the forest, Dasrath feared he would bring infamy to his royal line. No king in his line had ever been known to break his word at any time. Dasrath implored his wife, what would you gain by banishing Ram? He will always render you every service and remain entirely devoted to your welfare. I have never received a single complaint against Ram, even from his subordinates, let alone elders like you. Truthfulness, charity, asceticism, self-control, kindness, non-duplicity, learning and service to his elders, all these are ever present in Ram. How could you wish harm to that guileless prince? Dasrath could see Kaikeyi was unmoved. It was obvious her feelings towards Ram had changed. The king decided to try a different approach, and he invoked his own love for her. O Kaikeyi, you should show mercy to me in this my great misery. An old and worn man, I am fast approaching the end of my days. I have now been subjected to an unbearable grief in the shape of your harsh words. What do you wish to possess? I can offer you anything that may be had in all of this world. Only ask for your desire and continue and consider it done. Joining my palms, I fall at your feet. Do not banish Ram. Accept my piteous plea and save my life. Kaikeyi looked coldly upon her husband. He had fallen weeping to the floor and was tossing about, gripped by an overwhelming agony. He prayed again and again for deliverance, but Kaikeyi felt no pity. With her heart hardened by Manthara and her intelligence confused by the gods, she was fixed in her evil determination. Looking contemptuously at Dasrath, she spoke fiercely. After granting the boons and failing to fulfill them, how will you again proclaim your piety in this world, O noble king? When in an assembly of sages you are asked about your promise, how will you reply? How will you admit that you proved untruthful to your own dear wife, to whom you owe your life, having once granted boons and having again sworn 3 times to fulfill these boons? Will you now falsify your word? Kaikeyi was standing, her face flushed with anger. She felt cheated by her husband. He had promised her anything, now he was trying to back out. This simply confirmed her doubts about his sincerity. She had no intention of giving what she wanted. He had no intention of giving her what she wanted. Her voice became cold. What honor will you bring to your line by this action, O King of Kings? Do you not recall the many occasions when your forebears were prepared to sacrifice everything, including their own lives, in order to protect the honor of your race? O foolish king, it seems that at the expense of anything you wish to install Ram as your successor and enjoy life with Kaushalya eternally. Kaikeyi was furious. The king was prepared to sacrifice anything for the sake of Kaushalya's son, but he cared so little for Kaikeyi that he would deny her rights, even if it meant bringing infamy upon himself. She went on, her voice rising to a shout. Whether your promise was righteous or otherwise, and whether you made it sincerely or not, it cannot now be withdrawn. If Ram is installed as Prince Regent, I shall swallow poison and give up my life before your eyes. I would prefer death to seeing Kaushalya become the mother of the king. I swear by Bharat and by my own self that I will not be appeased by anything less than Ram's exile. Now, Krishna Dharma is not Valmiki. But he has captured, certain parts of the whole scene. Something that I particularly appreciate in Valmiki Ramayana is how Mantra rehearsed Kaikeyi again and again and again and again and again, and he'll try this and don't yield. I'd say it again, don't yield. Say it back again, you won't yield. Here's what you should do. He'll try this, he'll try that, he'll try the other thing, don't yield. So she was a good director, Mantra. And one of the expressions that Valmiki Ramayana presents is that while Kaikeyi was, her character was very sweet and virtuous and so forth, but he indicates she had 2 weaknesses. She was not worldly wise, and she was incredibly stubborn. So in her stubbornness, she was her natural affection for Ram and her husband became contaminated by her naivety and Mantra's wickedness. And when she was convinced, it was a bad quality. A good quality can be stubborn for a good thing. But when it's a bad thing, it can be very, very troublesome. And the way that Govindaraj is a Sri Vaishnava commentator on Ramayana, what he explains is not that the gods had befuddled her intelligence, but Ram himself had, meaning he's the Supreme Lord, and he's situated in the heart of every living entity, and he induced Kaikeyi to take the position that Kaikeyi took. I like Valmiki Ramayan's, although it's longer, so to narrate it in the way that we're doing, just reading a shortened version of Ramayana, it's practical, but there's some missing pieces that attract. I think there's a couple reasons, more than a couple reasons why. Valmiki Ramayana is acclaimed by our disciplic succession to be of equal status to Vyasadev's writings. I was listening, Prabhupada was in London, and some of he spoke, and some of the younger people asked questions. So one older fellow, a Scottish man, said, "You've given time to some younger people. Do you have time for an old man to ask a question?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, but you're not an old man and they're not young men, you're spirit souls, Pandita Samadarshana." So the man said, "Do you accept the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, and the four Vedas?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, of course, they're written by Vyasadeva." And then he added, "and Valmiki Ramayana." In the same discussion. And when, before compiling the Ramayana, Brahma gave him the benediction that he would see all the events, and he would understand the heart and the mind and the inner contemplations and the feelings of each of the personalities in Ramayana. So he's like super soul. Brahma gave him that benediction. So when reading Valmiki Ramayana, it's like, that's it. That's the gold standard. So something other than the gold standard is less than the gold standard, because the gold standard is the gold standard. So, although I'm reading Krishna Dharma's version, which is mainly based upon Valmiki Ramayana, but there are some embellishments that, even as I'm reading, it's like, somehow it's not the gold standard. So I feel compelled to make these little remarks. The main thread of the storyline is certainly there, and his writing style is really good. I guess I'm spoiled. I like Valmiki Ramayana. So let's see if there's some discussion. There's lots of lessons in all of this whole Ramayana narration. This particular part is upsetting in one sense, but there's lessons, practical lessons. Don't keep a mantra type person as your confidant. Okay, so any over here?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful lecture. I have two questions. One of the questions was, we saw the situation that Dashrath faced about keeping his promise, and then the consequences of not keeping his promise. Both had consequences. So
Right.
if we are in such a situation where we know that the person in front of us, and you have made a promise, but you know what the promise would lead to, what should be done? Should we keep the promise or should we not keep it?
Well, you can ask, you do what Dasrath did. You request the person to whom you gave the promise to release you from the promise. But if they don't, then you know, in most circumstances, as long as it's not you know, injurious to your health or something like that, or your safety, you fulfill the promise. That's the Ramayana's message. Satyam is the most outstanding quality of a Brahmana or a Vaishnava. They uphold their word. Now, there may be some cases where you, in addition to appealing to the person, you just are unable. And that's part of the criticism that went to Dasrath. How could he maintain it? Even his Kaikeyi extracted a bad promise from him. How could he uphold it? How could he do this? Anyway, in general, you keep your word.
My second question was related with Kaikeyi. So Kaikeyi was very convinced in what she was asking, and we might have had such company, we don't know the kind of people we meet, and so of course the obvious lesson is be careful of your association. But when a situation comes where you're very convinced in your reasoning, how do you make sure that you're not being unreasonable, or how do you back off from such a situation?
If we're in a Kaikeyi-like situation where someone is advising you that was improper or imprudent, how do you draw the line and how do you step out of that situation? That's what you're asking?
And that's one, and then the second was, when you're already in that situation and you're convinced, okay, what I'm asking is right, but how do you make sure that is it really right? Because you could be convinced in your argument what you want is right, but is it really right?
Well, the answer to the second one is Guru Sadhu Shastra. And therefore we should carefully read Prabhupada's books, because that way we're getting Guru, Sadhu and Shastra in one, just because the sadhus are quoted and the Shastra is there and the instructing spiritual master is there. And we take the association of others who are well learned and detached, who have understanding of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. That's the lens through which you look at some decision you're thinking to make, to do the course correction. If you're not. But a thought is, on the first one, the correction should come in advance. That is to say, be friendly to all, but keep those who have access to your more important decisions of life and so forth. Make sure that those persons are sadhu-like in character. Now, she felt indebted to mantra for various reasons that were mentioned. And so she was already compromised by her harshness and this and that and the other thing. She just rolled with the punch, although she spoke in ways that she spoke. She just don't let such persons have access to your heart. You can still be, cordial and so forth, but keeping such close confidential association with such people, that's a big risk. Okay?
So, when you said that when he was fighting the gods you said that Bharat will be. He said that Bharat will be king, but then when Gay
Bharat will be
came,
what?
Bharat will be king. You said that.
Pole?
Will be king.
King. Will be king?
You said that. So
I said that?
So king. So I think what he means is you had suggested that to Kaikai, Dasharatha had told Kaikai that his son will be king.
Yeah, that's not in Valmiki Ramayana.
I heard you say.
I was just reading. You say I said. I was just reading what Krishna Dharma wrote. So your question is?
So my question is, when you said that.
When I was reading that.
When you were reading that, when she was going to there, you said boons. So should it be Bharat will be king, or should it be boons?
Do you understand the question?
I don't.
Do you understand the question?
He's asking that what is when he already said that Bharat would be king, then why is it a boon? Because he had already promised her that Bharat would be king. So she didn't need to ask the boon from Dasharatha.
Yeah, that's what.
Take the microphone. He had not remembered that boon. It was said long ago.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the nectarian reading. Maharaj, we see example in the Shastra. We just read about Dasharatha Maharaj, who was a very pious king.
Yes.
We have also seen the examples of Pandavas,
Yes.
and they were all pure devotees.
Yes.
They got miseries which were very, very harsh. So, how do we explain that? Is it some karma?
No.
they're getting,
No.
or What is the?
I'm happy to address this question. Take the microphone. You're familiar with Rupa Goswami, right? So, in Rupa Goswami's main work, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he describes that there are 5 primary and 7 secondary rasas. And it's very detailed. And for each of the primary and secondary rasas, there's a presiding deity. And the presiding deity of the secondary rasa, which is commonly translated in English as sorrow, at least in this case, Ram is making an arrangement for his devotees, including Dasharatha and everybody, to experience sorrow. It's enhancing the primary rasa of parental affection in Dasharatha's case. But each of the persons that Ram, once he informed, they all, it was sorrow and sorrow and sorrow and sorrow and sorrow and sorrow. But so it looks like really like, I know some people that can't read Ramayana because it's too heavy. But the explanation is, that appearance of something that looks like sorrow is actually an ecstasy. It's a stimulation of the primary rasa, or enhancement or nourishing of the primary rasa, because the parental affection gets spiked, or the brotherly affection gets spiked, or the wifely affection gets spiked. It's nourishing rasa, a taste of rasa. So it wasn't common at all. It's part of Ram's Leela when he appears in the world to give happiness or to stimulate the love of his eternal associates. Now there's no banishing of Ram in the spiritual realm of Ayodhya. But here, that parental affection goes. And then there's other things that were accomplished by his being banished. That one, the killing of the Rakshasas. Of course, it could have happened some other way. But then giving his association to the sages in the forest. It wouldn't have happened. So it happened. It happened that way. So it was just part of it, part of the unfolding of the Leela of Ram, to give his association to the sages in the forest. Like that. Secondary rasa being stimulated. Now, you and I might have done things in a different way. But Ram did it in his way. Anything else?
There are 4 questions online.
Okay, let's go online.
So, the order in which we receive. The first one from WhatsApp.
From who? Who?
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. Oh, WhatsApp.
Yes.
Okay.
As an ordinary human being, whomever we take shelter inside our heart, we automatically attract their qualities. In this age, following Lord Ram's qualities is better, or Lord Krishna's qualities is better?
It depends on you. Which is better? They're both transcendently better. So it's not a matter of better, it's a matter of taste or heart's attraction. Those devotees, in ISKCON at least, those devotees who, I know devotees very, very attracted to Ram, and they have a clear understanding that Ram is one of the expansions of Krishna, and they're very, very, very attracted to Ram. So it's just fine. You can say which is better. Use different language. It's just fine that they're fully attracted to Ram, knowing that this is an expansion of Krishna, and they're very happy and very contented in that position. The classic example in Gaura Leela, we discussed this during Gaur Purnima, but one of the closest associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip was Murari Gupta, who was a dear devotee of Ram. And he was a dear devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tested him by asking him, take the worship of Krishna. He wanted to, but he couldn't. So Lord Chaitanya honored, I was just testing you. Of course you can't give up Ram. So if you ask Ramchandra, ask Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is better? And it's better for Murari Gupta to have full absorption in Lord Ramachandra than anything. That's what's better. Next.
From Zoom. Good Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please explain the reasons. Are Kaikeyi and Manthara considered instruments of Lord's plan?
Yes.
Or devotees should not be in such a position?
Yes. I mean, if you're a pure devotee, you can take that position, but pure devotees don't want that position. Unless the Lord so desires, but they're not hankering for such a position. Next.
From YouTube. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, this is from Snehavali. How can we identify mantra like people in our life? There is no record of mantra giving bad advice to Kaikeyi before. How would Kaikeyi have identified her nature?
Well, I don't know enough about Kaikeyi. The prior to Kaikeyi, prior to Mantra showing up at the time that she shows up in this narration, I don't know of other references. There is a book that was written by one of the younger generation devotees that has some story about mantra that I don't know where it comes from. So, so I won't go into it, but I don't know any authorized, or let's say shastric understanding of mantra's prior behavior and conduct and nature other than what we just read. She was known, she was recognized. So the question is a two-part question. How do we recognize mantra-like people in our lives? So harsh of speech, prone to anger, very judgmental, and things like that. So Kayake seemed to know that about her and wasn't so, when she started speaking like that, she just brushed it off. Oh, it's just her nature. And such people, there may be, we should keep the association of those that are guided by the qualities described in Bhagavad Gita, the qualities of those more influenced by the mode of goodness, especially persons who, as discussed before, we take close association from and let into our hearts and consider important decisions to be made. We seek the association of persons in the mode of goodness and pure Vaishnavas, sadhu-like Vaishnavas. So how you know the characteristics is from Bhagavad Gita, for starters. And who mantra was, what her character was like. We just read a little section here, but other than that, I don't know anything that gives details of what it was like for so many years previous to this episode. Next.
This is who was the best archer of Mahabharata?
What's the question?
Who was the best archer?
Who was the best author?
Archer.
Archer.
That's a bow and
Mahabharata.
Well, everybody knows the answer to that.
arrow.
You know the answer to that, right? What's his name?
Arjun.
Okay. Next.
Any Rakshasas took shelter of Lord Ramachandra other than Vibhishana?
Are there persons who did? That's the question. Well, even in Tirupalani, there were two sets of spies that were sent after Vibhishan came, and Lord Ramachandra gave them shelter also. Right at the same location, Tirupalani. And we can say, in one sense, all the Vanaras, led by Sugriva, took shelter of Ram. They were dependent upon him, and they served him. Now, the relationship was friendship, but it was also service and taking shelter. Jatayu took shelter and engaged in service. The circumstances are different. Anything else in the room?
Hare Krishna Swamiji, thank you for the nice lecture. So my question is, what was the real purpose for mantra trying to basically destroy Ram's coronation? Was it for the money, or was it because she liked Kekai and actually truly loved Bharat and wanted him to be king? So what was the real reason?
It's a combination. It depends on which version of Ramayana you read, but my understanding goes like this. she was very dedicated to the queen. She actually saw that the consequence for the queen would be negative. Be negative for the queen, be negative for her son. She saw enviousness because in the king, because that was her heart. She was projecting into the world, into the situation, her own dark heart. And that own dark heart was seeing, a bad consequence for the queen, bad consequence for Bharat, and not unimportant, but not entirely bad consequence for her. The misfortune of the queen would be her misfortune, because she'd lose out. For example, in Valmiki Ramayana, when it was known publicly that Bharata was going to come back and Kaikeyi's son would become the king, Mantra was decked out in fancy garments and la-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so she was given special honor. So that was not a zero. She was devoted to the queen, to Kaikeyi. She was thinking about the queen's well-being. And there's some of these reasons here. You're getting the favor of the king, but when Kaushalya's son becomes king, that's going to change. You're going to be not in the same special favored position. So your line is going to go down, and Kaikeyi's is going to go up. She was seeing like that, not by character, but just by her. So your question is, what's the real motivation? She saw it in a dark way. She saw it in a materialistic way. And this was in the disfavor of Kaikeyi and Bharat, and then in turn her. So when it flipped around the other way, she's like decked out and given more honor than even the present circumstance. So it's a combination of factors. But at least my understanding is she was actually very dedicated to Kaikeyi's service.
Maharaj, this question is not related to the class, but I've always had this. When Sita was taken away by Raman, Ram was very, very miserable, and
Yes.
when he was searching for her, he was crying in the forest and doing everything. We saw real pain.
Yeah.
But when we study those shlokas, they always, at least my understanding is that, look, even Ram was crying, so don't be so attached with your wife. And they say that, so is that wrong? Like, even Lord Ram, he was showing the love for his wife when she was gone. Why is it criticized that don't be so attached with your wife, or don't show that kind of love?
The language of the question is a little misleading. But to straighten it out, I suggest you read Canto 5, Chapter 19, Hanuman's prayers. And there's 2 prayers in those sets of 10 prayers. It's toward the very beginning of chapter 19. Kim Purusha Varsha, Hanuman's praying. He says, in addition to coming to 2 prayers, in addition to coming to this world to destroy Ravan, that was not the only reason. One of the additional reasons, primary reasons, was Ram wanted to show the world the consequence of becoming too much attached. Not just the sorrow, but the whole thing of allowing his wife to go to the forest to begin with. I mean, it's a Leela. But in the Leela is also a teaching. And the teaching is, there's a consequence when you're too much attached. And so the sorrow, in one sense, it's another rasa. It's a heightened of love and separation. And it's, so his crying is not like somebody else is crying. A man or a woman's crying for their beloved, their spouse. It's a transcendental love and separation. Like Radharani and Krishna and so forth. It's not... In a second verse, Hanuman says, there's absolutely no question of Ram being ever separated from Sita or Lakshman. It's not so. The meaning, what is it? It's a Leela. How can they be separated? They're inseparable. The sun and the sunshine are not separable. It's not possible. So we should understand it's a Leela, and there is a lesson in the Leela, along with the love and separation, Vipralambha Bhav. There is the lesson. Too much attachment. A little Prabhupada story. I've said this maybe 50 times. In Hyderabad, there was a 7-day Pandal program I was with the group that were doing. So every day at lunch, in the morning we go in Harinam, we go to some member's home for lunch, and in the evening was the Pandal in the public. So, and during the day, Harinam is, invite people to come to the Pandal. And so one day, the lunch was at the home of Mr. Reddy, the man who donated the land for the temple. So I knew that Prabhupada was inside, so I had my lunch very quickly and then went inside. So in a room about the size of this, big home, over there were the ladies, the lady of the house, and some of her friends. And over here was Prabhupada seated in a chair, and by his feet were the sannyasis. So she was asking she asked the same question in a different way. She says, Swamiji, why did Ram make a mistake? Why did he go after the golden deer? He must have known, he's omniscient. So why did he do that? And Prabhupada gave an answer, but she just kept asking the same question. But Sita had to get kidnapped and Ram had to suffer, all because he made, so why did he make a mistake? And we asked it like 3 times, and the final time Prabhupada said, this answer, this is the Hanuman's answer. Ram wanted to show you become too much involved in the association of a woman, and you're going to suffer. And the woman went on, doing her thing the 4th time. And Prabhupada looked at the sannyasis, and the sannyasis were chuckling because she was giving Prabhupada grief. That is, in that 3rd time, that when Prabhupada spoke that way, you too much association, you have trouble. Not, too much attachment, because he wasn't attached, he was just having lunch and went home, or went back to his quarters. So, Prabhupada said right in that setting, too much. Now there's a nice verse in in Krishna's teaching to Uddhava, a candidate for bhakti, this is eligibility, the adhikar for becoming a bhakta, practicing bhakti yoga, is neither too much attached or too detached. So, because you're too detached and you become an impersonalist, you're too much attached, you're a materialist. A candidate for progress is not too much either side, but attachment that's appropriate. And then this side, we have anything more online? We're done? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.